So I'm going to teach you guys all about propane fridges right now, and let's just look at the front of this guy right here. So on the front of this guy, down at the bottom, you get 3 controls, okay? You have primer, you have a climate control, and you have a sparker. Now usually what we do is we usually light the fridges by hand, but originally from the factory the sparkers worked, and some of them probably still do. The primer button needs to stay vertical in the direction of the flame. If you turn the primer button sideways to where it says off, then there's no propane that's going to be released into the to the flame. So it'll completely shut the propane off to the fridge. So very, very important, this primer button needs to stay vertical in the direction of the flame. This is your climate control. Now clockwise is colder, and when you run clockwise all the way up, that's maximum cold. Now you'll see that this little knob went a little bit past the stopping point, right? There's a little bit of play in this knob, and that's fine. If I want to go less cold, I go counterclockwise, about 2.5 or 3, depends on the outside air temperature, depends on how much stuff you've got in the fridge. But if the fridge starts to freeze, you turn this down counterclockwise to 2.5 or 3. If it's not cold enough, you turn it all the way up clockwise, as far as you can go. There's a stopping pin in here, but there is a little tiny bit of play in the knob. So all the way maximum clockwise is all the way cold. On the back of your propane fridge, back of the propane fridge, first thing that I see that's missing is I call it a turbolator. I'm not going to take this stack apart right now because we don't need this fridge, but what I would do if I was trying to set up this fridge is I'd cut the zip ties, I'd drop one of these things in here, and it goes all the way down. This little hook basically is the only part of this that you're still going to see, and the rest of this hangs down inside of here. The little hook hooks on the edge, and then if you look at this piping, there's a little spot where it's built out. That goes where the hook is at. Right? That's how that's supposed to sit. And then this piping gets all the heat up and above the system. Now, the brush hangs on the opposite side, hangs right over here. And the point of the brush is that sometimes in this system right here, it can get carbon and it can get soot build up. And the point of the brush is to brush this stuff out. Now, your burner's down at the bottom. The original brushes from the factory were metal, but the metal rusts and rots, and eventually they get replaced. And the replacement brushes are all nylon. Now, if you look at this nylon brush, it's melted. And the reason it's melted is because they didn't wait for this thing to cool down. And so what happens when you put plastic into metal? It melts. Now you just made the problem even worse because you got a whole bunch of extra stuff in here that's gonna burn up. And then what happens is it falls directly into the burner, and that's not what you want. So if you are using a nylon brush, you have to wait for this thing to cool down so you don't melt the nylon brush. The other problem with a melted brush is that it doesn't hit the walls anymore. It's almost useless, right? So it needs to be a fairly tight fit in here to make it actually work and to brush this out. Your burner is at the bottom. When you do brush this thing out, the burner needs to be covered up. You can use a piece of tin foil, you can use a piece of paper, you can use a piece of plastic if this is cold. But just for example, if you're using a piece of paper, you'd fold it over, just like that. You'd put it over top of the burner, just like that, so that all of the stuff that you're knocking down out of this pipe doesn't go right into the burner. If it goes right into the burner, you're not helping yourself, you're making it even worse. Now, once you've got this pipe cleaned out, the next part of it is to clean the burner. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take a can of compressed air, you're going to go into these little holes right here, you're going to slightly angle the air sprayer, and you're going to go this way, and you're going to push the air up through the burner and get rid of all the dust and dirt and debris out of the burner. When you're lighting these things, you're looking for leaks, especially right here, right at the control box. There's a rubber gasket inside of this that cracks and fails. And so what I like to do is I'll just take a lighter and I'll pass through here and make sure that there's no propane leaks under here. This is a critical area. So every time you light a propane fridge, you always do a pass under here and look for leaks in the orifice. This is your gas shutoff valve. Here's your on and off for your gas shutoff. Now, one of the problems that I see a lot of times with the gas shutoff valves is that when you're tightening this up, you have to use 2 wrenches. If you don't use 2 wrenches, you're going to snap this copper mechanism, and then we got to change the control box, and it's like a whole bunch of work for no reason. To get your crescent wrench onto here, usually you have to shut this into the off position so you can get right on top of there with a crescent wrench. You could also tip the fridge over to get on top of there with a crescent wrench, and when you're doing that, be real mindful you don't smash the thermocouple wire, which is this guy right here. And when you look at this burner mechanism, you see the thermocouple probe has to stay inside of the flame. Looking at this, this actually has one of those, has one of these gizmos right in there already. Look at that. So that was just buried down there, just fell down. So this guy should hang at the top. The wire needs to hang over the top, just like that. This guy needs to go over just like that. The venting needs to go up and out the top, right? So you don't want the heat rubbing against this coil or against the cooling coils. The heat has to go right out the top. Every time you walk by the fridge, you put your hand up on top of the heater to make sure that it's still running, because the wind can come in there and blow it out. Now I want to show you guys a real common problem underneath of the fridge. Now, this is what I wanted to show you right here. So remember on the front of this thing, we were talking about primer, climate control, and then the other one over here is your sparker, electronic sparker. What happens a lot of times is that the primer line falls out. So it goes like this. Okay, now it's out. Now, from the front, you can't really tell what's going on, but if you look at this guy right here, there's a circle on the bottom and it's flat on the top. And so if I put this in straight again, it's going to be fine. But if I put this in like upside down, it'll kind of jam in, part of the way, and then I'll think, oh, well, I think that the diagram on the front is proper, but it's actually upside down. And so you're actually not getting any gas into the unit because you've actually got this thing shut off. You just can't tell by the diagram in the front, because it's not a perfect system, because you can jam it in and still get to, you can jam it in. That's the problem is. So when you're putting this guy in, you have to actually look at the plastic. Okay, there's your circle, and there's your flat part. And then you look at this thing, okay, there's the circle, there's the flat part. We're gonna put this guy in so that it actually, put the apples with the apples and the bananas with the bananas, right? The circle with the circle and the squares with the squares. And then now that's actually in the proper way, and now it's actually, the diagram in the front is proper. But you can see that there is a little bit of play. So if I put this in completely upside down, you can still jam it in and force it in and not really understand what's actually going on. And that's a real common problem, because this is just soft plastic. Now, the other part about this I want to show you guys is that when you're lighting these things, but if you're by yourself or there's a guest who's all by himself, you can light it by yourself. And the way you would do this is from the back. So instead of holding the primer in from the front and then trying to reach around in the back, you do it all from back here. So you can imagine you're back here, you get your flame on the burner, and then you reach in right directly behind the propane supply line is the primer. And you can feel the spring, right? So when you let go of the spring, it releases forward, and it's right directly behind the control box, and it's the very top line you see. So now I'm holding in the primer, and now I'm lighting it, and I'm doing it all by myself, right? So you don't need a second guy to make this thing work, okay? You guys have any questions? Good, go fix something.